Thank you for being here today. My name is Andrea Smith. I have the privilege of being the pastor here, and we are so grateful that you have chosen to take some time out of your Sunday morning. Today is a special day. It is our chili kickoff. It is the beginning of our series, Peace, Love, and Rich. We are, believe it or not, in the top 1%. If you are watching online with us this morning, or you are here in this space, you are in the top 1% of wealth all over the world. Now, we may not feel like that, but it's true. And so we have this awesome privilege of being wealthy and being rich. And for the next 3 weeks, we're going to talk about what we do with it. And today, it's such a cool day. We've not done this in years and years and years. So a huge shout out to Beth Packman, Tammy Seiler, Dawn, and the whole missions team. All of our missional partners that we are focusing on, especially in this next month of service, but all year long, they are represented out in the Commons area, and they have a pot of chili, and we're having a competition. And so this is going to carry out, it's starting today, it's going to carry out through Christmas, and our Christmas Eve offering is going to go to support 3 of these nonprofits, and you'll hear about that in your email and in the weeks to come, but it's just an exciting day. And if you're worshiping with us online, we're grateful that you're here. We're sorry you're not able to be here in person, but we are still grateful that you are worshiping with us, and we're going to provide for you opportunities to be a part of these things other than the chili. We couldn't figure out how to make that happen. But we're going to we have ways for you to partner with our missions in the days and weeks ahead. So thanks. If you are newer to the West community, if this is your first time with us today, we invite you to visit our VIP tent out front. We have a gift for you, and then you can choose how much you hear from us moving forward or not. You can also text the number that you see on the screen, and then you can sign in or opt in to our communications. It's an awesome privilege to be a part of West Church because this is who we are. We are missional. We exist to give ourselves away, and it's exciting to be able to talk about that with you. So I invite you to stand and join in worship in song. So in the video, I said 4%, but actually it's 1%. We are in the top 1% of wealth across our world. Now, a huge part of that is that it's our world, right? And there are large populations of people that do not live here or live in a developing nation that get entered into that data. If you read the Friday e-news, you read that I put in the subject area, actually, this week sucked. Or sort of, until someone made me have perspective. I lamented just a little bit in the e-news because there was a point to that. I don't think that the busyness of my life this past week or 10 days is any different than anything you face. And so when I write things like that, I feel like hopefully you can see that we're all in this together. We all wrestle with some of the same things. But the takeaway to that was after I'd written that article, I got an email from a gentleman named Blaze. Now, Blaze is one of our leaders of our West Church Uganda. We have a campus in Kagumba, Uganda, that is led by 5 gentlemen, Blaze, Mweje, Dero, Philip, and Fareed. Those are the 5 gentlemen that lead our campus, and every other Saturday they join together with people in Kagumba, and they have worship just like we have worship here. They have a message that Dero brings, and then they have something for the children. Mweje works with the children, and then on the off weeks that they have public worship in Kagumba, they go out into the villages. We would call that the bush. It's where folks live any way that they can, in huts, in, if they're lucky, cement structures, and they take West Church to them. One of the inspiring things about West Church Uganda is that they are modeling our DNA, and that you, number one, go where the people are, just like we do golf and yoga church and other fresh expressions, and that they exist to serve others. So they are starting one of the things that we believe will help West Church Uganda grow. They are starting, and there was a football team. For us, it's called soccer. Philip and Fareed both play soccer or have played soccer for Uganda. Uganda, and so in a more professional sense. And so they are starting a football/soccer team there to help build West Church, to take the message of God's love for all people, which if you're familiar with Uganda at all, you know that the core value that we have, that all means all, and we believe that all people can be married, all people can exist together and love and serve and those kinds of things. That is against the law in Uganda, and it is punishable actually in some situations by death. So the fact that we have a campus there in Uganda that the core value is all means all is huge, and it's one of the reasons that we stand behind that mission so strongly. Now, part of leading a campus here in the United States, or a church here in the United States and in Uganda, is that we are learning the differences in our cultural differences, our communication differences. And even though we've been doing ministry in Uganda for 12, 13 years with Acres of Hope, who is another one of our global partners and still just such an important and vital part of our DNA here at West, and we're supporting a trip, or going to promote a trip that's going to happen there in July, and we encourage you to go there with Lance and Joycelyn and others as well. But one of the reasons that we are so passionate about ministry in Uganda and challenged with that is the perspective that it brings to us in our lives. So here I was, I had gone to the beach and then been a part of Tom's Triathlon, then come back and done this amazing Halloween event, which you all made happen. We had over 450 kids here, which means over 1,000 people. At one point, there were 400 cars in the parking lot from our guests. We already have at least 8 new families that have signed up for our Amped Children's Ministry. I mean, great. That's worth celebrating. I mean, that ministry grew by a 5th percentile, so it's 1/5 bigger. That is huge. And so it just great stuff happening. And then Dawn and Lane were relentless about the mission and the vision, and they're like, we need to do this sip and shop. I'm like, I think we're crazy. We don't have the time or the bandwidth to do that. It was an event that was held down at I still call it the Point, where people came in and could shop and see about soul creations. And I just felt like we were overextended. And they're like, no, we committed. We need to do this. We need to get our product in front of the people. So they went and did that. And then I flew to D.C. like 5 hours late. It was a cluster. The whole week felt like a cluster. And then to get back, and then we had a golf tournament on Thursday to help support our Uganda campus. It was just insane. So by the time it came time to write the e-news article, I was sitting in the airport after like 2 hours sleep, and I just didn't have any real spiritual stuff to share. I was frustrated and tired, and things still loomed large. Not to mention that our family has like a wedding a week from yesterday. So just things were weighing heavy. And I remembered the power of the moment standing in the National Cathedral there in Washington, D.C. with these guys from the research that Johns Hopkins has been doing. They were making about psychedelics in our faith journey, and they were making a movie about that. And I don't often get asked to be in movies, so I thought this is my one chance to do that. But actually, it's really because I'm passionate about that mission and helping people in stage 4 cancer diagnosis, or dealing with addiction, eating disorders, and PTSD. Those are the areas of focus that Hopkins and NYU and Berkeley have been using this research for. So I'm really passionate about helping others through that way, and the FDA approving it. So it was a big week. It was an emotional week, and the power of the moment of standing in the National Cathedral so they could get some shots, which I hope, made me look better than I think I look on camera. But standing there and looking at the stained glass windows, I noticed something. There was this beautiful, beautiful window, and when you stand off from it, it just looks like a beautiful stained glass window. But when you get up close to it, you could tell every tiny little piece, like it told its own story. And it made me think about us. It made me think about West. It made me think about all the different aspects and ways that we have our touches on places in this community. It made me even more excited, again, to be able to serve alongside such an amazing missions team and leaders and staff, so that our reach and our touch can make a difference. And it made me remember that sometimes we need to slow down and we need to breathe. You guys live crazy, hectic lives. And if you have kids in today's society and world, I think parenting now is 10 times harder than it was when I did it just 10 years ago. The pressures are so big and everyone is so busy. And that's why I wrote the e-news. To just hopefully remind us that if we'll stop and just breathe for a minute, we can see the smaller things that when added up become the bigger things, and all things are beautiful. So I wrote that article, and then Blaze, who is one of the leaders of our Uganda campus, wrote me. And he said, "I'm sorry your week was like that. I had no idea things were like that in America." And I thought, oh, Blaze, you have no idea. Like, this is just a snippet. Like, you have other people, like, they're way more stretched thin than I am. It's all about perspective, and it's about what we see. As I was studying for today's message and for the next 3 weeks that we're going to be talking about how rich we are and what we do with it, I came across this video. Andy Stanley is one of the most amazing pastors in our society and culture today. He is Charles Stanley, the late Charles Stanley's son. He leads North Point Church in Atlanta and has most recently begun sharing with them his theology, which is much in line with what United Methodists believe and how we live and how we as West live. He's turned the Baptist tradition upside down and has caught a ton of flack. But he truly is one of the most gifted preachers and speakers and leaders that exist in our culture today. And he interviewed a gentleman that started a nonprofit called Convoy of Hope. It is a powerful nonprofit that North Point aligns themselves with. And frankly, like, we had this idea to do a week of service like 15 years ago at Williamson's Chapel, the missions team. We did it. It was my ordination project. And then we've just sort of carried that out into our DNA and wanted to do it again in a more focused way as a church. But Andy Stanley, like, he does the same thing. So I just think that's really cool. They have like a month of service. They call it Be Rich and How to Be Rich. But in his sermon, he interviewed this gentleman, and I was going to tell you his story today, but of course it's his story. He tells it so powerfully. And he tells you the tragedy of his life, what he did with his life, how he had this turning point when he interviewed Mother Teresa, and where he is right now in his journey. I'm not going to show you the whole sermon because, I mean, we don't have that much time, and I really want you to go meet the people that are outside from our nonprofits or who are representing our nonprofits, and we want you to eat chili. But I wanted you to leave with like this conviction that we're all in this together, and we all have such a tremendous impact that we can make. And I believe that this video will inspire you. So let's watch it together. I'm going to share a few closing words with you, and then we're going to go outside. But take a few minutes, and let's listen to this gentleman's story.
Please welcome Hal Donaldson.
Good to be with you. Thank you. Thank you.
So a lot of us are not familiar with Convoy of Hope. So just a little context. It's one of the largest, even though you may not have heard of it, it's one of the largest and most highly rated nonprofits in our nation. Forbes always has it in the top 50 best charities in the United States with a 95% efficiency rating, which means they're looking at how much of the money that comes through an organization actually goes into serving people. 95% is amazing. Charity Navigator gives you a 99% rating, a 4-star rating. But because I know the story, it's big and it's amazing, but it started off with a tragedy. And your story is what makes, in some ways, the story, your personal story makes the story of Convoy so compelling. And I just wanted our church to hear a little bit about your personal story before we talk about Convoy.
Well, first, thank you for the invitation, and thank you, North Point, for just your generosity and kindness to Convoy of Hope through the years. We're just really indebted to you. It really starts when I was 12 years of age. My parents were scheduled to attend a business meeting, And my two younger brothers and younger sister and I were supposed to stay home with a babysitter. But the babysitter was late, and so my dad said, you'll have to hop in the car with us and go to the business meeting. My father was halfway down the road when he glanced at his rearview mirror and he spotted the babysitter pulling into our driveway. And so my dad made a U-turn, dropped the four of us kids off, and we would spend the night with the babysitter after all. So about an hour and a half later, there was a knock at our door, and I ran to the door, and there standing in front of me were two uniformed police officers. And they had come to deliver the news that my parents had been hit by a drunken driver. My father had been killed instantly, and my mother was seriously injured, fighting for her life in the hospital. But Andy, I'll never forget that night, because a number of friends and neighbors began to gather in our front yard. And the police officer pulled me up on the porch, put his arm on my shoulder, and he addressed the crowd. He said, are there any family members or friends here who are willing to take the children home with them? If not, we'll take them downtown to the station. And that night, I'm sure it was just a matter of moments before someone responded, but for a kid, it felt like minutes. And finally, one young couple raised their hands, and their names are Bill and Levada Davis. And they said, we'll take them. Now, to be fair, I think they thought that they were signing up for like a 1 or 2 night sleepover.
Right.
But we ended up living with them for about a year. And all they owned was a small trailer. And so all 10 of us had kids of their own. And so we lived in that trailer for about a year.
Wow.
There weren't enough beds, and so we took turns sleeping on the floor. But the Davises, they drained their savings account. They sacrificed their privacy so 4 kids could have a home.
Wow. Well, their generosity was amazing, but the story didn't necessarily get better from there, because your mom was in the hospital.
Yeah.
Severely, I mean, you talk about that. That's part of the story.
Yeah, my mom, because of the shards of glass from the windshield, her face was terribly scarred and scabbed. And so they wouldn't allow me to see my mother. Weeks passed. Finally, they let me go to the hospital. And Andy, I passed out when I looked at her because I couldn't believe that was my mother. Her hip was crushed, her ankle was crushed, and so she would limp, had a terrible limp the rest of her life. But those were some tough days. She recovered. She was able to get 2 part-time jobs, and so we were able to get a place of our own. But as a 12-year-old boy, I struggled. I just couldn't understand how a loving God could allow a father to be taken from 4 small children. And I couldn't comprehend how the man who hit them could walk out of jail 48 hours later. Meanwhile, our family was sentenced to a life of poverty. It just didn't seem fair to me. But one day, Bill Davis, who we had been living with in the trailer, he saw that I was struggling, and he came and he threw his arms over my shoulder, and he spoke these words. He said, Hal, listen to me. Don't allow the tragedy of your youth to become a lifelong excuse, because where you start in life doesn't have to dictate where you end. And those words were life-giving.
Wow.
Gave me hope. My parents didn't have insurance, and the man who hit them didn't have insurance. And so our family was forced to survive on welfare and food stamps. And there were many times that the cupboards were bare. And so we had to go to school without a sack lunch, and days we had to go to school with holes in our shoes and holes in our jeans. And friends, that's before it was cool to have holes in your jeans, you know, yeah. Yeah, some very, very difficult days. And so, Andy, I know the shame of poverty. I lived it. But I also know the power of kindness, because people at our church, they wrapped their arms around my family, and they would come to our door week after week with bags of groceries. And people ask me all the time, well, what difference can a bag of groceries make, or a plate of food? Trust me, for a hungry kid, it makes all the difference in the world.
Wow.
Every time those bags would come to our door, it was like Christmas all over again. One time, a woman saw that I had holes in my shoes at church. And so she went to my mom and she asked permission to take me to Kenny's shoe store. Now, Kenny's, some of you will remember this. Back then, they had 3 pairs of sneakers. One for $2.99, one for $3.99, one for $4.99, right? I'm not talking about $299, $2.99. And so, all I'd ever known of the $2.99 pair. And so when we walked in Kenny's, I made a beeline to those shoes. But this particular day, this woman waved me over to the $4.99 pair. And she said, today, Jesus wants you to have the best that they have.
Oh, goodness.
So their kindness, the power of kindness, kept me from becoming bitter. And I truly believe that in God's scheme, grand scheme of things, that he took my father's mangled automobile, and one day he would transform it into a fleet of Convoy of Hope trucks that would crisscross our country, offering help and hope to millions of people. Only God could do that. Amen. Amen. To God be the glory.
So, moving forward, that didn't happen quickly, and it wasn't even your intention. You weren't a little boy that suddenly had a vision for compassion for others. You're a little boy who's poor, and you know, it wasn't unusual. You decided never again, and that sort of shaped the trajectory of your life, the poverty, more than compassion. Talk a little bit about how that transition happened.
For sure. When you're raised poor, you begin a quest not to be poor anymore. And that was certainly the journey I was on. And I thought the best way to escape poverty was through education. And so I worked my way through college, earned several degrees, and I found myself in my 20s working as a writer. I have a journalism degree, and I was writing books. And one of those book projects took me to Calcutta, India, to write a book for some missionaries. And when I arrived, they said, well, we want you to interview someone for our book. And they took me to interview Mother Teresa, of all people.
And you were how old?
29.
29,
yeah.
Okay.
And in the course of the interview, she turned the tables on me. She said, young man, let me ask you a question. What are you doing to help the poor and the suffering? And I figured it was probably not a good idea to lie to Mother Teresa. Yeah. I told her the truth. I just said, I'm really not doing much of anything. Mm-hmm. And she kindly said, well, everyone can do something. Just do the next kind thing that God puts in front of you. And as you can imagine, those words were haunting for me. Mm. And I remember going back to my hotel, which was a very nice hotel, surrounded by poverty, but a nice hotel. And just in my hotel room, just crying before God and saying, God, priorities have to change in my life. Something has to change. And I was confronted that night with a question, am I happy and am I fulfilled? And Andy, the answer was no, I wasn't, because I was only living for myself. I'd forgotten what my father had taught me, that the key to happiness and fulfillment is serving others. Be rich, serving others. And, you know, so that night I just really said, God, you need to do a work in my life. And I came back to the States, and I just continued to pray, God, make some changes in me. And I felt one day compelled to do something quite unusual, to travel to 8 cities and to live in the streets for 3 days and 3 nights.
And before you tell more of the story, you were already married.
Yes.
Yes, yes.
Amazing woman.
So tell us about that conversation. Honey, I feel compelled. Yeah.
I did, and I haven't shared this a lot, but she can validate it. She said, are you sure? You look like you belong on Mayberry RFD. You know, Andy
and you're going to go
show.
live on the streets.
You're going to go live on the streets. And I said, I'm just so confident that I'm supposed to do it, that I believe that God is going to supernaturally provide the resources to do it. And he did. Mm-hmm. I was sitting down with a man I was discipling, and he just asked me, a new Christian, he just asked me, he said, Hal, is God telling you to do something? Again, brand new Christian. I said, yeah, he is. He said, well, I'm supposed to pay for it. And right then and there, he took out his checkbook and he wrote out a check to cover all the expenses.
And which cities did you go to?
I went to Atlanta, Miami, DC, New York, Chicago, Detroit, major cities, and lived in the streets for 3 days and 3 nights, along with friends. I didn't go alone. And I had a hidden tape recorder. So I had interviews with drug addicts and gang members, prostitutes, runaways, and the homeless. I went places I never thought I would go. I went to crack houses and jail cells and seedy bars and et cetera, et cetera. And all I can tell you is that as I saw the underbelly of America, God truly broke my heart. He broke my heart. And I like to say that I believe God had to do a work in my heart before he could do a work through my hands. And I came back from one of those trips, and I had to do something. And so we took $300 and we bought groceries, and we loaded up a pickup truck, and we went into the migrant farm workers part of Northern California. We began passing out groceries to the migrant farm workers, telling them Jesus loved them, we love them, and there was a church right down the street that loved them too. And that really was the start of Convoy of Hope 29 years ago. And since that time, we've now been able to serve and share the love of Jesus with over 200 million people around the world.
Goodness.
I give you glory. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
That was 29 years ago.
It is, and another thing I'll add is that I really felt compelled to also start the feeding program. And because I really felt like we were supposed to be feeding 1 million children every day, so they could wake up every morning knowing they have access to food and clean drinking water, and no longer scavenging off of garbage heaps, and no longer begging in the streets and sniffing glue to take away their hunger. And God blessed that as well. That's grown from just hundreds to now every single day we're feeding 530,000 children around the world. Yeah, to God be the glory. Thank you. Thank you.
So behind all that is an amazing organization, and we've had opportunity to see some of that organization and meet some of the most amazing people. And in all that growth from a pickup truck to, that's why I wanted y'all to see the video, the 18-wheelers rolling up and down the highway from Springfield, Missouri, just distributing stuff, you know, the Gulf Coast during hurricanes, I mean, and then all over the world. You experienced, you discovered something about momentum. And every business owner and everybody in business, marketplace leaders, a momentum is really our best friend. When you have momentum, you look way smarter than you actually are, right? It may just be the economy or luck, but it feels great. But in your case, you discovered something in terms of momentum that sort of dovetailed or synced up with the way that God works. And I think it's so interesting because I do think there's transfer to our personal life. Just talk about a little bit about what you discovered.
Certainly in the early days, probably the first decade, I thought that we could create momentum by simply tweaking the organization and with minor changes, we could create it. But the longer I've been at it, the more I realize is that you don't create momentum as much as you invite momentum. You invite it. And at Convoy, about 12 years ago, we invited momentum into the organization. We repositioned it, if you will, underneath God's spigot of blessing. And when we repositioned it, everything seemed to change. And sometimes I think we have to reposition our businesses, our ministries, even our personal lives to really get into the flow of God's blessing. We did that 12 years ago, and we've been growing at 20% a year for 12 consecutive years.
That's amazing. And specifically, what did that entail? Because I think that's fascinating.
I think really the main point is that we aligned our expectations with God's plan. We really began to seek, what is it you want to do, God, rather than what we want to do? And we changed the question. The question was, for years, how do we grow Convoy of Hope? The question changed to now, God, how much can we give away? Who can we bless? Be rich. Who can we bless? And so instead of building another charity, it's how do we empower the church and become a channel of blessing to the church? And we recommitted ourselves to linking up with the local church. Everything Convoy of Hope does in the United States and around the world is in partnership with local churches.
The thing that has been so motivating to me as a leader and as a pastor is, as organizations mature, there's a shift that happens. I mean, when you had a pickup truck full of groceries, there wasn't much to protect, right? There wasn't a lot of risk. You weren't trying to protect anything. There was nothing to protect. Now that you're an international organization, a huge organization, the temptation is always, we have to protect our asset. We have to protect. And then people begin to close their hands around this. And that decision those years ago, you know, as I've heard you tell this story, was really kind of your way of saying it, no, we're not here to protect anything.
Right. That's right.
And consequently, it really, you know, the wider our hands are open, the more God can put in our hands. And I just, even as a leader, that's so motivating to me. Now, that kind of dovetails into what I think is one of the most fascinating things, and I'm going to get this a little bit out of order, but being involved as I have and tracking along with you, one of the things that always amazes me, and I asked you this the last time I had an opportunity to interview you, was your organization, Convoy, responds quickly to emergencies and natural disasters. You can predict a hurricane, natural disaster, but there's a lot of natural disasters. You just wake up and look at the news and, oh my goodness. You're always so quick. So my question was always, how do you budget for a natural disaster? How do you budget for an emergency? And so my thought was, well, they must just hoard millions of dollars waiting for the next earthquake, like what's happened in Morocco. We'll talk about that in a minute. But that's not the way you do it. And the context for the question I asked you originally was, you guys, your team was in Ukraine so quickly and spent, I'll let you talk about the numbers of dollars with resources moving into Ukraine. In fact, NBC did a presentation, or actually NBC embedded one of their reporters with one of your trucks crossing the border from Poland into Ukraine and watching that. It was amazing, but I was thinking, you responded so quickly. How do you budget for something unpredictable like that? That's a long question, but.
Yeah, so, we really believe in the importance of humility and reliance on God. I mean, that's kind of one of our core values. We're going to rely on God. And so we don't budget for disasters. We don't. When we deploy our relief teams, they're told to go and meet as many needs as they possibly can. We want to be driven by need, not money, okay? And so in the case of Ukraine, we sent the word out that we were on the ground, and people responded. More than $30 million was given. Think about that. $30 million was given very quickly.
Yeah.
Yes. And Convoy of Hope has been able to take that $30 million and translate it into $60 million worth of aid that has reached Ukraine. We're working with 350 churches.
In country.
In country,
wow.
Yes. And so they're like compassion hubs. And there are distribution points, if you will. And so we've been able to work with them to just make a difference in their communities. And when this war is over, people are going to be able to look to the church as their solution, if you will.
Yeah, watching the video and just the interview with the truck driver and then unloading those crate after crate after crate of water and goods, it was amazing. You were in Maui quickly.
Yeah.
I looked on the website yesterday. You're already, somehow you're in Morocco already. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I asked you backstage, like, really? I mean, this just happened, but it's almost like you anticipated this.
Well, we've been working in Morocco for a number of years, and so we had the relationships on the ground, and by using airlifts, and we have containers that are
on their way
across the Atlantic. And yeah, you can really pretty much assume that if there's a disaster in the United States and around the world of any medium magnitude, we're not asking, can we raise money? We're asking, can we meet needs? Can we lift up the name of Jesus, and can we elevate the local church? So really, that's our forte. And so, these 20 some odd years, we just believe that if we're doing that God is going to pay the bill. And these 20 years he has. He's supplied.
Okay.
So much in there to unpack. Mother Teresa telling him, just do the next kind thing. We all can do small things. And that's her quote, do small things with great love. Everyone can do the next kind thing. When West began 13 years ago, we had a core foundation Bible verse that is still our core. It's why we are doing what we're doing today. In the next several weeks, I invite you to look at that with me. He has shown you, O mortal, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? To act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. It's why we exist, to give ourselves away. It's why, every year in November and December, we watch the bank account to make sure, okay, we don't have hoards of money that we're storing up anywhere. We exist to make a difference in the community. And we may not ever be able to give thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars like other bigger organizations are able to, but you all make it possible for West to have an impact in this community. And if West did not exist, this community would know it. I mean, think about the ways that you've been instrumental in Acres of Hope. And our first presence on the ground there 13 years ago, there was nothing. And then through supporting Pastor Jeffrey and that organization in alliance with Williamson's Chapel, like we built pod houses. And now they have school buildings and so much. And they continue to make a difference in the community. Think about the Back to School Bash, which served this year more kids than ever alone. You started a nonprofit so that could have a bigger impact in the community. We served 1,200 kids this year with new tennis shoes, new backpacks, and a festival-like atmosphere and new school supplies and clothes. It was an amazing day. You all make a difference. You listen to Mother Teresa, you are doing what she and Jesus taught and teach us to do. So as we leave this moment, this holy moment, I really want you to pick up one of these. This is who we are for the next month and the days ahead, but in a concentrated way in the next month. There are pots of chili out there that you are going to enjoy. Each one represents one of these missions. We have community representatives with us today that have given of their time. They're not getting paid to represent their nonprofit this morning, but they came here to meet you. And then I invite you, along with Lane and Dawn and myself and all the other part-time staff that we have here and our leaders, sign up for one of these activities in the next month. You want to know how to be rich? You want to know how your heart will feel full? Is to give of yourself for someone else. It changes everything. And it changes your soul. And it is in those moments of serving and those moments of sacrifice that you will, I promise, connect with God in ways you can never imagine. Let us pray. Gracious God, it is a privilege to serve you. It is a privilege to be in this space, excited about the ways that we can use our resources to make a difference. Thank you for all the nonprofits, these and those that are even beyond the scope that we can focus on, that they exist to make people's lives better. God, be with our intentions and our actions over these next several weeks. May we be for others your light and your life and your presence. We are so grateful to be able to serve. Thank you for loving us so unconditionally. We offer ourselves to you in Christ's name. Amen. As the team gets ready to play our closing song, I want to let you know one thing. Like, we don't pay our West Campus Uganda people, because I don't even begin to know how to do that, and that's like international law, and so that is not anything we are ever going to do. But we do financially make offerings to them. In determining how to give an offering for their living expenses, we did research on what an upper class or a middle upper class income would be for an individual in Uganda. It is $300 a month. My cell phone bill is close to that. Hulu is a third of that. A TV streaming platform for 1 month is a third of providing someone a comfortable lifestyle. The coolest part about this is so Blaze, I shared with you, he's the one that we make the largest offering to because he works with our team. He does all of our social media. If you see something posted by Wes, 90% of the time, it's created by Blaze on the other side of the world. He worships with us. He is a part of our community. He wrote me a few weeks ago and he said, I'm not telling you this to brag on myself. I just want you to know the impact that West has had on my life. And he said, I have far more than I ever imagined I would have. And so I bought Mwaj a cell phone. Now, the sad thing about Ugandan the economy there is that things cost in Uganda what they cost here. Like, we wanted to buy Blaze a laptop because he edits our worship videos and all that stuff. We wanted to buy him a laptop. Josh was willing to fund it. And we can't do it because of the outrageous, we just refuse to pay that in Uganda. Yet here is a young man who's like 27 years old that has learned what it means to act in kindness. And so he took what he had and he gave it away because of you, because of the way you live and love and lead. So let's stand and sing, and then let's go eat some chili.